My research at Exeter has lately been focusing on how you can learn about climate change, in particular the social aspects of climate change, through data from social media. As more and more of our daily activities occur online, these data sets are becoming much more rich. So one example of that is to look at the debate about climate change as it's played out online. This diagram shows the interactions between social media users talking about climate change. What you can see from the diagram is a very strong network structure. There's a strong community structure with two large clumps of users who interact a lot amongst themselves, but there's not much interaction between the two clumps. And when we looked at the attitudes of the users in those sort of groups, we found that one was very much an environmental activist group, people promoting action to tackle climate change or sharing new information, new scientific findings. Whereas the red group was largely composed of climate skeptics, people who were doubting the science, didn't believe it was happening or that humans were causing it. Now we're working with environmental charities and campaign groups to try to see how this kind of insight can inform their future communication strategies. Another example is looking at social media as a kind of global sensor network. So if you imagine each social media user is essentially a sensor reporting on all the things they see in the world around them. You can spot spikes of activity around the world at different times. This animation is showing posts around climate change over a 2-year period, and when you suddenly see a cluster of dots on the graph, it's basically telling us that something happened at that time in that place. Now what we are finding is a lot of political events, so demonstrations and rallies, but also extreme weather events, floods and hurricanes and storms. These sorts of weather hazards are predicted to increase as climate changes, and while we have good methods for observing those in nature, what we don't know much about is how they affect people's lives. So looking at the social media data can really tell us a lot about the problems people face and how they respond to these sorts of weather hazards. And what's interesting about this is that we're getting along with this not only the activity level, but what people are saying. So how are they being affected by the floods? How are they taking steps to respond or prepare, or what problems are they facing? This kind of information is really useful if you want to plan strategies for adaptation to climate change. We're now working with partners in the UK, also in Europe and in Africa, to work out how this data can be made most useful for decision makers and stakeholders to work out how to adapt to climate change.